Hey, it's Jason from Pro Guitar Studio, and this week we're going to focus on arpeggios. Now, we're not doing just any arpeggios, we're not doing full fretboard arpeggios, we are taking a look at one octave arpeggios, okay? So what that means here is we're going to make it simple, make it easy enough for everyone to play along, and hopefully you can get an arpeggio for a minor chord and a major chord under your fingers. Now, I've done these arpeggios in a few different ways, so I've played them from the root note on the 6th string, 5th string, 4th string, and I guess as I go through the 3rd string, right? So we have 4 sets of strings. 2 of them are going to be in the same octave, which you'll see as we go through it. But the biggest thing I want you to get here is actually learning how to play an arpeggio, okay? And when we're talking about arpeggios here, we're talking about lead guitar arpeggios. We're not talking about like arpeggiating a chord, which is a great skill to have too. So what we're going to be looking at is basically a chord. If we're taking a look at, like, let's say a G minor. This is the first chord I'm going to be using here. And the only reason I'm choosing G minor as the starting point is that I have a really cool riff that we're going to learn, okay? So don't worry about the theory too much here. Worry about playing these shapes, because once you get the shapes under your fingers, it's easy to revisit the theory. But as an example, instead of playing the G minor bar chord, we can arpeggiate it. You know, if we're playing rhythm guitar, or if we're playing lead guitar, we can arpeggiate it this way. Now, oftentimes you'll see arpeggios introduced as more of like a full fretboard, like a 6th string, which can be sort of daunting to start. So I've separated this into single octaves. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 notes total, and the 4th note is the same as your 1st note. So just to get into it, the idea of an arpeggio. So what is an arpeggio? An arpeggio is a broken chord. So it's the notes in a chord played separately. So today we're going to do a minor chord and a major chord. And both minor and major chords have 3 notes, okay? So these are minor triads, so 3-note chords. And if we're looking at the chord, they're constructed of 3 notes from a scale. So to jump back into what a scale is, in this case here, we're going to have 7 notes. So let's say the major scale. Okay, so if we took a look at the C major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 8th note is back to our root note. So to build a chord, we're using the root note of the scale, the 3rd note, so we're skipping the 2nd, skipping the 4th, and using the 5th. So we're using the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th. So in the C major scale, we're using the 1st, 3rd, 5th. And the last note is our octave, our root note again. So root, 3rd, 5th, root. So that's for a major chord. Now a minor chord lowers that 3rd note down 1 semitone. But it can be much easier to play this note if I'm playing this here. So from C to an E flat, it can be easier to play on the 11th fret of string number 6. And the reason why that's good is because it's handy and you can actually visualize your chord a little more clearly sometimes. But there are many ways we can play arpeggios, okay? So I'm just giving you 2 ways here. These, over the years, have been the 2 most common ways I've seen them used in songs, and also probably the easiest for most people to pick up because the spacing is going to be closer. So keeping it within like a box, we can play within the spacing of 4 frets. Whereas other fingerings are great, but sometimes they will stretch out and go across 5 frets. And that can make it a little difficult if you're just getting used to this, okay? So, like I said, we're going to be doing a minor arpeggio and a major arpeggio and using this riff to learn it, okay? So I'll first show you this riff, and then I'll explain the arpeggios. But let's take a look at the riff. So we're starting on a G minor chord. We don't need to play the chord, but just so you can visualize that here on the 3rd fret. If you have a power chord, you can see that too. We're playing the 3rd fret, string number 6, to the 6th fret, string number 6, to the 5th fret, string number 5, to the 5th fret, string number 4. Now when I'm playing this example, I did a little bit of a hammer on. Okay, so I hammered on from 3 to 6. You don't have to, you can do it. So what I'm doing here, I'm going up from the bottom of the arpeggio to the top, then going back down to the 5th fret, string 5, to the 5th fret, string number 4, back to string 5, to the 6th fret, string 6. And final 2 notes are the 5th fret, string number 5, 6th fret, string 6. So feel free to move your fingers. If you need to use your ring finger to start, go for it. I would suggest to use these fingers if you can. But it's not the end of the world. If you whatever way will help you get started today. Now the second arpeggio, we do add 1 note that's outside of the arpeggio, and I'll explain in a minute. So we're going to play the 4th fret, string number 6, okay? And that's because we're playing the A flat chord there. So we're from G minor to A flat major. And we're going to play 4th fret string 6, 3rd fret string 5. So this is where the major scale would come in, just to sort of visualize that. And we're going to go to the 6th fret string number 5. Now when I play this arpeggio, if we're in the box, we'd be playing pinky finger. But in real life, in real practice, I find the ring finger is a much better candidate. So you can use your pinky if you want. But to play through this, often you'll find yourself using this bottom portion of the major chord to have to use. You can do that. And I spent years just practicing the arpeggios just like that. But over the course of years after that, I realized that in real playing situations, this is more useful because we can play the chord, and it's easier to actually understand how it relates to the chord too. But yeah, whatever way is going to work for you. If you want to use your pinky, go for it. All right, so we have the first 4 notes like we did rhythmically on the first chord. So in this case here, 4th fret string 6, 3rd fret string 5, 6th fret string number 5, 6th fret string number 4. And then we're going to slide up from 6 to 8. Pick it again on 8. 8 one more time. Back to 6. And this is just, at the end of it's a little tag because the riff that's going on in the background goes from A flat to B flat. So it just sort of highlights that. Otherwise, we're just sitting on the arpeggio. Plus, in real music, often we don't just sit on arpeggios the whole time because it can sound very plain and boring. But I'm trying to make it as close as possible to something that will help you learn these arpeggio shapes. Just adding that one note to add some interest. But usually in a real song, a real example, I would add other notes in too. Okay, so keep that in mind. Once you learn these arpeggios, that's not the end of it. We're going to learn how to integrate that with scales and other notes that you might hear that would sound good on particular chords. Stuff like that, okay? So we have this. And then maybe I left this out, but we go back to the 6th fret, so after we play the arpeggio, I really quickly go back to the 5th string, 6th fret, before I do the slide. You could leave that out. No problem. All right, so go back over the first chord just so you see the note names. G, B flat, D, back to G, okay? So this arpeggio here is made out of these 4 notes, or 3 notes, but we're adding the root note on top again. G, B flat, D, okay? And then we're going to G on the top. Now the reason why this is a B flat and not an A sharp is because G is the first note of the scale. A would be the second. So if we called an A sharp, it wouldn't be a third interval. It wouldn't be the 3rd note of the scale. Okay, just bear with me here. Hopefully that makes sense. But we go G A, which is note number 2, and B flat would be note number 3. If we went G to A sharp, it means we don't have a second note in there except for this one. So it's a sharp number 2 or sharp 2. And so we want this to be the 3rd note. So it's going to be called B flat. Okay. And the second arpeggio is A flat, C, E flat, and then repeating A flat. And when I slide up that note there, it's going up to a B flat, which is where the chord is, okay? So it might take you some time to get that riff going with the rhythm and the timing, but even if you play it out of time, that will give you the arpeggio, okay? And that can be used to make a whole bunch of different riffs if you're playing on the low end. I use that all the time on the bottom end. It could be rock, it could be funk, whatever you might imagine. We can ghost bass lines, we can copy bass lines, that kind of stuff. Now when we go on the higher end though, it sounds a little bit different. So as I shift down, I'm just going to go to the next root note. So the 5th string. And so we're going to play 10, 13, same notes, G, B flat, 12th fret string number 4, 12th fret string number 3. So D and G. G, B flat, D, G. So I'm doing the same pattern, okay? Just keep that in mind here. And then I do an A flat, so 11th fret string number 5, 10th fret string 4, 13th fret string number 4, and 13th fret string number 3. An A flat, C, then we have an E flat, okay? Back to our A flat. And same ending there. Alright, so in the example, I played the first riff twice. And this riff here I just did once because the same octave exists down on the 4th string, okay? So we're going to play from 5 to 8. Now I do this one a bit differently because of the way the shape is. So I use my index and then my ring on the 8th fret. So still again G, B flat. And we're going to go to a D note on fret number 7 on the G string, okay? And then we play our G note again. String number 2, 8th fret. So you could use, but I tend to use it here so I can jump back into that chord shape. So feel free to use whatever you want. Index, pinky, or index, ring, middle, ring. Next note, A flat is the 6th fret, string number 4. We have a C note, so 5th fret, string number 3. And then we're going to have also ring finger on the 8th fret of string number 3, which is an E flat. Now I have to use that note because the next note is the 9th fret, string number 2. Whenever we use the second string, we have to add 1 fret to our shape. Same with the first chord shape, right? Because of the tuning. So we're going to go to the 9th fret, string number 2, which is the same as our root note, A flat. Okay, so I do that just once in the recording, but you can play it as many times as you like as you go through it. Now the final one, root note, 3rd string, 12th fret. 12, 15, and then 15, 15. So on string number 3, 12, then 15, and then string number 2 is 15, string number 1 is 15. I do a finger roll. But do whatever way you can, so I'm rolling my finger down to get those notes, and I hammer on, just like the other examples. Now G, B flat, D. Okay, now next note, A flat, we're going to go to the 13th fret, string number 3, 13th fret, string number 2, A flat, C, E flat is the 14th fret on string number, that's what I'm saying, 14 is 16. So 13, 13, 16 on string number 2 and 16 on string number 1. So A flat, C, E flat. Alright, and that's played twice. So ideally as you go through this, you can learn that riff, play it in time, or you can go through and just learn the shapes, right? So if you know those 1 octave shapes, they're really easy to move. Instead of thinking of everything as like a 6th string, we're sort of stuck using that full arpeggio. But to make these useful in songs, if we know where that root note is on each string, right? It's a lot more useful. You can use it for improvising. You can use it for chord-based stuff, riffs. I'm just copying the rhythm so you can sort of get an example. But every octave has its own perks, right? So the second octave here, if we're going down, it gets away a little bit from that low riff. So it can have a different tone to it, different sound. So those notes will ring out differently, and you might find you like a particular octave better. So most important here, again, the shapes. Don't worry, if you can't get the riff fully in time like I have it here, just go for the shapes. But I know learning things with a distinct rhythm and some, a little bit of flair, like adding that extra note in there, can be a lot more fun. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Have some fun with it. If you have questions, let me know below. But if you like this, give me a thumbs up, subscribe. More videos coming at you next week. And this week your job is to learn the minor and major 1 octave arpeggios.